We're doing overhead focus flow. So if you'll need a broomstick or a mop handle or a TheraBand and a very light weight. Okay, so come and lie on your backs. So I always start with connection, posture and breath. So we'll spend about sort of 10 minutes or so doing that, and then we'll go onto the flow. So you lie on your back with your head resting on either like a pillow or a towel rolled up, or just an ab mat or something like that, just to rest your head on. And then you want your feet to be hip distance apart. And so we're just going to think about connection first of all. So where we should be feeling connected is underneath both feet, underneath the lumbosacral junction, underneath the TL junction, both shoulder blades and the back of the head. So what we're going to do now is just work on a few postural cues just to get better connected. So you're going to think about your feet and think about which side you're feeling more pressure on. So we're going to try and shift the weight from side to side and try and get a little bit more balance. So try and get the connection equal between both feet. So when you feel like it's equal, just pause there and then have a think about where you're feeling the connection between your foot and the floor. So are you feeling it on the outside of the foot or the inside? So if you're feeling it more on the outside, try and pull that inner arch down towards the floor without lifting the outer arch. And then if you're feeling it more on the inner arch, try and pull the outer side down to the floor, but without lifting the inner arch. So you want to feel it equal from side to side of each foot, and then equal from foot to foot. So when we've got better connection between our feet and the floor, we're going to work our way to the lumbosacral junction, so junction between your lower back and your pelvis. And we're just going to do some pelvic tilts. So you're going to rock your pelvis forwards, so peeling your spine away from the floor. And then you're going to reverse peel your spine, so you're lowering it down towards the floor, and you're going to take your pelvis into a posterior tilt, so it's tilting backwards. And then we're just going to alternate between those two movements. So rocking backwards and forwards, peeling the spine away from the floor, and then lowering towards the floor. And then we just want a pause in the midpoint between the two end ranges. So that should be a neutral pelvis and a neutral lower back. And when you get into that position, you should feel like you've got better connection between that lumbosacral junction and the floor. So then we'll work our way up to the TL junction. So junction between your upper back and lower back. And you want to think of your rib cage and pelvis like the pages of a book. So what we don't want are for the pages to be open. So when we have this open book, we get rib flaring and this lumbar extension. So we're going to try and pull the pages together. So we're closing the pages of the book, pulling the rib cage towards the pelvis. So trying to get away from this rib flared position, this lumbar extension, so that your rib cage and pelvis are parallel with each other. And by doing that, you should then feel a bit better connected between your TL junction and the floor. And then we'll go to the shoulder blades, and we want to think about that connection throughout this flow. So that's what the aim of this is to be able to get overhead, keeping the rib cage and pelvis in connection. So then we'll work our way to the shoulder blades. Again, they want to be equal from side to side. So shift the weight from side to side until you can feel like the weight underneath them is more balanced. And the shoulders themselves don't want to be in an elevated, protracted and internally rotated position. So we want to pull the shoulder blades back slightly. You don't want to pull them into the floor. Try and depress your shoulder blades like you're trying to pull them towards your back pockets, and try and externally rotate at the same time. So it's like a scooping motion. So you should feel some activation underneath the shoulders, so back of the shoulder. And that's getting the shoulders into a more neutral position. So I'm going to work our way up to the head. So back of the head wants to push straight back down towards the floor. Head, eyes pointing up to the ceiling. And we're going to try and avoid going into neck extension or neck flexion. So it's going straight back down towards the floor, and you should feel those muscles at the front of the neck become a bit more active. Okay, so now we should be feeling better connection underneath both feet, lumbosacral junction, TL junction, shoulder blades, and the back of the head. So now we're going to work on our breath. So put one hand on the chest, one hand on the tummy. And we're just going to think about our breath. So think about what's happening as we breathe in and as we breathe out. So as we breathe in, the hand on the tummy wants to lift. And as we breathe out, the hand on the tummy wants to lower. So really try and visualise what's happening. You can feel the hand on your chest lifting as you're breathing in. We want to try and get away from that, because we don't want you to be breathing through your chest. We want you to breathe in through your abdomen. So we're lifting the hand on the tummy when you breathe in, and lowering the hand on the tummy when we breathe out. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, through pursed lips like you're blowing through a straw. So just spend a little bit of time really trying to visualise what's happening, thinking about the breath. Try and clear your mind, try not to think about anything else other than your breath. When you feel like you've got your breath in the right order, we're going to put the hands around the waist. And as we take a breath in, we want to try and create a 360-degree breath. So as we're breathing in, we want to feel all the muscles under the hands expand the whole way around. So take a breath in. See if you can feel anything expanding underneath the hands. If you're struggling to feel that muscle activation, you're going to cough, feel the muscles expand, and then try and use that as a bit of a wake up for your brain to let your brain know where the muscles are. So this will be equal from front to back and equal from side to side. So if there's a side that you're struggling with, or if you're struggling with the back, you're just going to really try and focus on that area. Give it a bit of a poke. So my side that I struggle with is the right side. So I have to just really jab it to wake it up. Cough again. Feel that expansion. And then try and think about those muscles trying to lift and push your hands away. If you need to, you can do it in stages. So think about the front muscles first of all. So just poke them a little bit. Breathe, expand, lift your fingers up towards the ceiling. And when you've got those, come round to the sides. So stick your thumbs into your sides, give them a prod. And then think about pushing the thumbs away with those muscles. And then come round the back, so thumbs jabbing into the back. And then think about those muscles trying to push your thumbs down towards the floor. And then try and tie it all together, so you're doing your 360-degree breaths. It's all happening at once. Okay, so once you've got your 360-degree breath, we're going to work on the brace. So I say brace, we're not clenching or tensing, or we're not sucking the belly button in. It's an outward push, so we're going to breathe and expand. 360 degrees, and then before you take your breath out, you're going to do an outward push. So the cue I use is to imagine that you're farting. So you're going to breathe and expand. Imagine you're farting, so you're going to create that feeling like you're about to fart, or go to the toilet, or whatever you want to think about. And then try not to let the muscles relax as you're breathing out, so don't let them completely relax away from the fingers. And then you're going to keep on breathing with this outward push. Just do a couple more breaths. Okay, so throughout the flow, we're going to think about the breath, think about trying to create that 360-degree breath, and then when we're doing something that needs a bit more stabilisation, we're going to create that expansion and that outward push and the brace, and try and keep breathing through it. Try and keep neutral spine, so back wants to be flat on the floor, it doesn't want to be caved in, doesn't want to have an arch, so we want to keep the back flat on the floor, try not to let your hands get underneath. And then, like I say, whenever we take the arms above the head, we're going to try and really focus on keeping the rib cage down. Okay, so we're going to start by just in the supine position, so feet flat on the floor. We're going to start lifting the arms, so fingertips towards the ceiling, and then take the arms back, thumbs pointing towards the floor. And just really try and focus on what's happening in the rib, in the abdominal area. Do you feel like the ribs are starting to lift? If you get to a point where your ribs are lifting, just hold it there. Take another breath in. Expand the 360-degree breath. And then on the exhalation, just try and take the arms a little bit further back. Then take another breath in, expand, and the exhalation will try and go a little bit further. Really focusing on keeping the rib cage and pelvis connected. Another breath in, expand, and lower the arms a bit more as we breathe out. So just in your own time, do that flexion extension movement of the shoulders. Pausing when you get to a point where the ribs are starting to flare. Breathe in, expand, and lower on the breath out. And only go as far as you can, so if you feel like you can only get so far and the ribs are starting to flare and you can't get any further, don't force it. You're just going to hold that position and then breathe in, breathe out, and just try and get a little bit further. You don't have to force the movement. It should just naturally release quite easily. Okay, grab hold of your stick. Might need to move over a little bit. And then start with your grip quite wide, and then we're just going to do the same. So we're going to take the stick above the head, keeping the ribs down, so flexing the shoulder and extending the shoulder, so taking it back down. Really try and focus on the ribs Again, when you get to that point when your ribs are starting to lift, just hold it, breathe in, expand, and lower a little bit more on the breath out. So just trying to improve that motor pattern and that body awareness. If you can, start to take your hands in a little bit narrower, but only if you've got that range of movement to be able to do it. If you want to, you can grab hold of your TheraBand. Make it a little bit more of an active thing, active shoulder activation. Couldn't think of the right word then. So grab hold of the TheraBand and try and pull the TheraBand apart and take the shoulders into flexion and back down again. Try and make that pull equal from side to side, so it's not just one shoulder taking over. Try and keep that lower back on the floor. Let's do a couple more. Okay, put the TheraBand to one side. We're just going to start to lift our legs now, so we're going to do single leg alternating. So we're going to lift one leg and then lower, lift the other leg and lower, and we're trying to make this movement come from the hip only. So we don't want the pelvis to tilt forwards, we don't want it to sort of drop on one side. Don't want your lumbar spine to lift off the floor. So lifting and lowering, alternating sides. How's your lower back at the moment, Shaz?
Yeah, good.
Oh, good. So okay, so if there is anything that you feel a little bit unsure of with your back, just scale it back an option. But if it's not feeling so bad, then you should be fine with this. So, but just shout out, let me know if anything's too much or anything. Okay, so we're gonna create our 360-degree breath, create our brace, and then what we're gonna do is lift both legs up into the air at the same time, but be really sort of thinking about what's happening in the pelvis. So try not to let that, as you lift your feet, you try not to let the pelvis tilt forward. So we're gonna keep that brace throughout to control that movement. So lifting and lowering. Just do one more, and then we're gonna pause in the 3-month supine position, so legs up in the air, feet neutral, feet higher than the knees, knees over your hips, hips externally rotated. And we're going to try and hold this position, try not to let the tummy muscles tense. So if you need to at any point, you can either lower one leg down, or if you've got a gym ball, you can rest your legs on the gym ball. But we're going to try and hold the legs in the air, keeping the lower back on the floor. And we're going to just take the arms up into the air again and take them backwards. Again, focusing on the rib cage and pelvis and making sure that they stay connected. Again, if you get to that point and you feel like your ribs are lifting, pause. Take a breath in, expand, try and get a little bit lower on the exhalation. Nice, smooth, controlled movements with the shoulders if possible. And then grab hold of your broomstick, or you can grab your TheraBand, whichever one you prefer. And then I might just grab the TheraBand, make it an active shoulder flexion. Take the shoulders back into flexion and then down. As you're coming into flexion, try and kind of pull the TheraBand apart and externally rotate the shoulders as if you're trying to take the thumbs down towards the floor, because flexion is a coupled movement with external rotation, so it gives your shoulder the space to actually be able to go into flexion. Do a couple more. Bring your knees to your chest, and put your band down or your pole down. Bring your knees to your chest, give your hip flexors a little bit of a rest. And you're going to go back into 3-month supine. Get your pole, take it above your head. And we're just going to hold that there, so into shoulder flexion, just as far as you can with your ribs, and we're just going to start to toe tap, so single leg toe taps initially, so lower one leg down and lift, and then do the other side, again trying to keep the lower back flat on the floor. If you can, start to do some double toe taps, but only if you feel like you've got control of your pelvis and you're not going into that anterior tilt. And if you can, you don't have to do this, you can carry on with doing the toe taps, but if you can, start to extend alternating legs. Keeping that lower back on the floor, keeping the rib cage and pelvis connected. And if you want to push it a step further, see if I can do this tonight, I'm a bit tired, do some double hip extensions, but only if you don't go into that lumbar extension and anterior tilt. I'm going to go back to single because I'm too tired for that today. Huh? Okay. Put the broom down, bring your hips in, just give them a bit of a rest. Then if you've got your light weight, go back into your 3-month supine, just get your weight into both hands. And then we're just going to slowly lower it backwards, keeping the rib cage and pelvis connected. And only go as far as you can, keeping the rib cage and pelvis connected. You won't be able to go as far with the weight in the hands. do a couple more. Pop the weight down. Again, bring your hips in, give them a bit of a rest. And then we're just going to roll from side to side. So we're just going to lift the arms up into the air, lift the head slightly. So legs back into 3-month supine. Just going to roll onto one side, so nice and controlled. Try and make sure the pelvis and rib cage rotate at the same time. And then we're rotating back. And then go the opposite way. And back. Try and control the movement from side to side. Don't let yourself just collapse down. And then try and make sure you've got a nice straight spine, so we're not bananaing into the floor. So rolling from side to side. And then we're just going to, from the 3-month supine, we're going to roll onto one side and just come up into a lower oblique sit. So onto your side and then up onto your hands. So we're in this mermaid position. So legs in a mermaid position. So if you need to, you can put a block underneath your bum so that you're a little bit higher there. But so if you need to, like a block or a book or anything like that. But if you're all right, then we'll just do the mermaid position. So grab hold of the weight, the light weight. And what we want to do is we're going to start focusing on keeping the rib cage and pelvis down. We're going to do both sides. So just feel what the rib cage and pelvis are doing and just try and take that into the air and down. We'll do 6 on each side. And then take it to the other hand and do 6 on the other side again. So you might struggle on one side more than the other. So my left ribs are the ones that I struggle with. Okay, so if you can rotate the knees up towards the ceiling. Okay, make sure that we've got a nice straight spine. We're not sort of just rounded like this. So if necessary, you can get a block and put it underneath your bum to lift you up so you can get a bit taller. If you can do it without it, that's fine. And we're just going to take both arms up into the air and then down. Again, we're focusing on ribs and pelvis, connecting, keeping that nice long spine. So up and down with the arms. Let's do a couple more. Again, if you get to a point where the ribs are starting to lift, pause, breathe in, expand, and get them a little bit further back on the breath out. Okay, so we'll roll round to the other side. So it's the opposite oblique sit. And we'll do the 6 on each side if you can. So focusing on those ribs, keep the ribs down. Okay, so from this oblique sit, we're going to lift up into a tripod position. So I'll show you what I'm going to do first. So you hinge forwards and lift, and actually not into a tripod, into a high kneel, sorry. So if you need to, grab hold of a block or something, put it underneath your bum so you've not got as far to go when you come up. And then take the leg forwards into the high kneel. Okay, so you're in the high kneel. So what we want is, we don't want the foot to be too narrow. So we'll take the foot out to the side. We want the pelvis level with the floor, so you don't want to be all crooked. So one side of the pelvis higher than the other. So we're going to scooch the pelvis down so it's parallel with the floor and find your neutral spine. And then we're just going to start by alternating arms, so alternating shoulder flexion. Again, slow and controlled. Thinking about the ribs. If you need to put your hand on your ribs as you're doing it to feel what they're doing, that's fine. Now go into double arms, so we're taking both arms up at the same time. Just do one more. And then in this position, grab hold of your weight again. And we're just gonna, if your left leg's forwards, you're gonna be using your right hand. And we're just gonna do some shoulder press on that side, keeping the ribs down. So we'll just do 6 again. Or just as many as you can. Okay, so when you've done that, we're going to go from the high kneel position into a standing position. So when we go to stand, curl the back foot under, lean the weight forwards. If you need to, you can put a chair or something next to you to support. Because what we want is to make sure that when we stand, the pelvis stays level with the floor and the knee doesn't cave inwards. So the knee wants to track the second and third toe as we come up. And then we're going to drop that the right side back again, or whichever side you just lifted. And we're slowly lowering down, keeping the pelvis level with the floor. Go back up into stand. Slowly, slowly, slowly down. And then when you come up this next time, try and take the arms up into flexion. And then bring them down as you lower down. Forwards, arms up, ribs down. Lower back down. Arms up, ribs down. Lower back down. And then we'll just do one more. Ooh. Back down. And then from the high kneel position, imagine you've got a ball in your hands, between your hands that you're squeezing together, and you're just gonna lift the ball up into the air and twist your bodies round to the opposite side, the opposite high kneel. And then you're gonna lift, take the arms up into the air so that you're going into a full shoulder flexion, keeping the ribs down, and then rotate the opposite side. And we're just gonna keep doing that from side to side. And then we're going to finish on the opposite side. So I'll turn around. So now my right foot's forwards, not too narrow, so bring it out to the side, pelvis level with the floor, neutral spine, and we're just going to alternate the arms. Really focusing on those ribs staying down. Keeping that neutral lower back and pelvis. Trying not to let the spine go into extension. And then take both arms up into the air. And down. You might start to feel this in your bum, so on the side that the foot's forwards. If your pelvis is in the right place, it's not tilted in a diagonal position, so pelvis is level with the floor, you might start to feel this glute activation, which is a good thing. Okay, so now if your right foot's forwards, take the weight in the opposite hand, keeping the ribs down, and we're just going to do 6 presses again. And hold on to the ribs and pelvis and just try and make sure your ribs aren't lifting. Okay, so now we're going to go to stand again, so curl the back foot under, we're going to lean into it and we're going to stand. Try not to let the knee collapse inwards, try not to let the pelvis shoot to the side. Back foot back, slowly lower down, reset the pelvis. So this is my bad side, so I always have to reset this side, keep it level with the floor. And then we're going to add the arms in as well. So as we come up, arms into flexion, down as we come down. Let's do a couple more. And then from the high kneel position, lower the hands down to the floor. You're going to lift the back knee off the floor, bring that foot backwards into bear, down into quadruped, and then down into low quadruped. So what we want is for the knees to be wider than the hips, forearms in a kind of diamond shape, so like that. Middle finger in line with the forearms, elbows in line with the ears. So we're going to work on some thoracic extension with shoulder flexion, which obviously we need thoracic extension for shoulder flexion, so that we don't go into lumbar extension when we take our arms above our heads. So find your neutral spine, so we're going to tilt the pelvis backwards and forwards, and find your neutral so that you're not in too much extension and not in a flex position with the lower back. Activate through the shoulders, so push the forearms down into the floor, try and externally rotate and depress the shoulders, and then once you've got your neutral lower back and your shoulder activation, and as well try not to let the neck go into extension, so we're tucking the chin slightly. We're going to work on trying to pull the upper back towards the floor without going into this extension position in the lower back. So try and imagine you've got like a piece of string underneath your sternum, like the bony bit at the front, that's pulling down the upper back towards the floor. If you feel like your lumbar spine goes into extension as you're pulling down in the upper back, then try and keep the upper back where it is, but tilt the pelvis slightly backwards, and that will just pull your lower back into a neutral position. Okay, so once you've got your position right, we're just going to flex the hips backwards. So the bum's shifting backwards, the shoulders are going into flexion as well. Try not to round the lower back, and then come forwards. So you're extending the hip without losing it into the lower back. Keep those shoulders active. And then we're rocking backwards and forwards. So flexing the hip, flexing the shoulder, extending the hip, extending the shoulder, trying to keep the upper back in a flat or extended position, so a nice long spine, trying to keep the lower back neutral, pelvis neutral, so backwards and forwards. Again, think about the ribs as well, so don't forget the ribs, try not to let those disconnect from the pelvis. Do a couple more. And then from this position, we're going to lift up into quadruped. Again, we'll find neutral spine. Upper back nice and long, and trying to extend the upper back. So trying to imagine the string pulling the upper back down towards the floor. Active shoulders, so you're going to push the floor away with your hands and externally rotate and depress the shoulders as if you're trying to pull them down towards your back pockets. Keeping that neutral spine, we're going to shift the weight backwards, so we're flexing the shoulders, flexing the hips, and then come forward, so we're extending the hips, extending the shoulders. Keep the shoulders active, don't let them collapse, so don't start to wing the shoulder blades. And as well, try not to let the neck go into that neck extension. do a couple more. Okay. Curl the back feet under. Make sure you've got your neutral spine, upper back nice and flat, shoulders active. And if you can, you're going to lift your bum in the air, knees off the floor. And you can either hold that position or shift the weight backwards. So you're flexing the shoulders. Try and flex through the hip, not the lower back. And we're just going to hold and keep the ribs and pelvis connected. So trying to emulate an overhead squat. Walk the hands backwards. Just into your squat as far as you can. So if you don't have to be too deep or anything like that. Actually, I might need to walk. So go back down into your bear. Should have got us to shake our legs out before we went into squat. So my quads were burning then. So give your legs a little shake out. Find your neutral again. Upper back nice and flat. Curl the back feet under, lift. Walk your hands backwards into your squat just as low as you can. You don't have to be too low. And then we're just going to, in this position, just hold this position. Try and take the arms up into flexion and down and up and down. Up, down, stand up. Probably won't be able to hold that for very long. Grab hold of the stick. And we're nearly done now. So we're just gonna take the pole above the head, lower, keep the ribs and pelvis connected, so really nice and slow and controlled. Feel that movement, or at least feel that there's no movement between the ribs and pelvis, so they're staying still. And then if you can, keep the stick above your head, and we're just going to go into a squat. So we're going to find your neutral pelvis, neutral spine, and just go down into a squat just as far as you can, and up, and down, and up, down, up. Let's do a couple more. And we're done.